Podcast topic, iWant, the social network that gives users back control over who they are becoming. Problem. Social networks today know very well who you are becoming, maybe even better than you think. They know what moves you. They know what stops you. They know what irritates you. They know what makes you compare yourself to others. They know what pulls you deeper into the screen. But the real question is, who are they using that knowledge for? For you or for themselves? Because most platforms do not use your behavior to help you become a more fulfilled person. They use it to turn you into a user who is more valuable to them. A user who stays longer, clicks more, reacts more, scrolls more, comes back more often. And over time, if you are not careful, you do not become what you chose to become. You become what works best for the algorithm. You become the version of yourself that is easiest to keep, easiest to trigger, easiest to sell to, easiest to turn into attention. And attention is the currency of social networks. That is why the real question is no longer, what am I watching? But, what is this turning me into? Does the content I consume and create every day cover my whole life? Or does it constantly push me into one single energy? Always into comparison, always into proving myself, always into desire, always into reaction, always into noise. That is where the need for a different kind of social network begins. A network that does not use your behavior only to keep you there, but to show you a mirror, to show you which energies you are feeding, which parts of life you are developing, which parts you are neglecting, and whether you are becoming a person who is useful to the algorithm or a person who is fulfilled within yourself. Solution. That is why I created a different system. A system that does not only try to hold your attention, but tries to show you what your attention is building. A system where a post is not just another post, not just a photo, not just a video, not just a status, not just a topic. A post becomes a trace of the energy you create from, a trace of the state you communicate from, a trace of what you want others to feel when they see you. That is why every post is tagged through two levels. The first level is energy. The second level is vibe. Energy shows which part of life the content comes from, and vibe shows what feeling, value, or perception that content carries. In other words, energy says where you are coming from. Vibe says how you want to be experienced. The tag looks simple, energy/vibe. For example, to act/power, to love/gratitude, to express/mastery, to perceive/insight. At first glance, this looks like a new tagging system, but the essence is much deeper, because these 7 energies together cover the whole of life. To have, to feel, to act, to love, to express, to perceive, to know. Each of them represents one basic part of being human, one aspect of life, one way in which we build identity. To have is the energy of security. It speaks about the body, about home, about money, about results, about status, about stability, about what you have, build, and protect. When you post from this energy, you show results. You show routine. You show progress. You show a life that is becoming more stable. This can be the vibe of stability, loyalty, prosperity, patience, tenacity, career success, vitality. This is the part of life that says, I am building a foundation. I am creating security. I have something real behind me. To feel is the energy of feeling. It speaks about emotion, about atmosphere, about pleasure, about the body, about attraction, about spontaneity, about the inner experience of life. When you post from this energy, you are not only showing what happened, you are showing how it felt. This can be joy, creativity, adaptability, sensuality, fertility, pleasure, sexuality, emotional depth. This is the part of life that says, I feel, I experience. I let life move through me. To act is the energy of action. It speaks about strength, about discipline, about decision, about movement, about ambition, about personal power. When you post from this energy, you show effort, you show challenge, You show focus. You show the moment when you are not standing still. This can be the vibe of power, confidence, charisma, strong will, humor, leadership, mental clarity. This is the part of life that says, I move. I take responsibility. I have the strength to act. To love is the energy of connection. It speaks about people, about family, about a partner, about friends, about trust, about gratitude, about empathy, about healing. When you post from this energy, you show what connects you to others, not only what you have, but what you share. This can be love, trust, healing, equanimity, compassion, connection, surrender, gratitude, forgiveness. This is the part of life that says, I am not alone. I love. I belong. I am open to others. To express is the energy of expression. It speaks about voice, about truth, about creativity, about attitude, about communication, about who you are when you stop hiding. When you post from this energy, you are not only showing content, you are showing your expression, your point of view, your message, your authenticity. This can be truth, purpose, expression, artistry, service, synchronicity, communication, virtue, mastery. This is the part of life that says, I have a voice, I have something to say, and I stand behind it. To perceive is the energy of perception. It speaks about the way you see the world, about intuition, about vision, about dreams, about insight, about the ability to notice what others may not see. When you post from this energy, you are not only sharing information, you are sharing perspective. You are sharing a way of seeing. You are sharing space for reflection. This can be vision, intuition, dreams, insight, perception, equanimity, clairvoyance. This is the part of life that says, I see deeper. I sense the bigger picture. I do not only look at the surface. To know is the energy of knowledge. It speaks about wisdom, about awareness, about understanding, about lessons, about logic, about meaning, about what you know, but also what you have understood through life. When you post from this energy, you share knowledge. You explain. You teach. You connect things. You help others understand. This can be unity, wisdom, awareness, intelligence, understanding, miracles, bliss. This is the part of life that says, I understand, I learn, I see meaning, and I can pass it on to others. Together, these 7 energies create a map of the human being, not a map of interests, but a map of life. Because you are not just someone who likes sports. You are not just someone who likes music. You are not just someone who likes business. You are not just someone who likes travel. You are someone who has a body, emotions, action, love, voice, perception, knowledge. And that is why this system does not only ask, what is the topic of your post? It asks, which part of yourself are you posting from? Which energy are you feeding? What vibe are you sending? How do you want others to feel you? And what does your content say about who you are becoming? This is where the real difference begins. Traditional social networks look at your behavior to predict what you will click next. This system uses your behavior to show you what you are building within yourself. If you constantly post from one energy, it becomes visible. If you are always acting, but rarely feeling, you see that. If you are always learning, but never expressing yourself, you see that. If you are always loving others, but forgetting your own security, you see that. If you have vision, but no action, you see that. If you have action, but no meaning, you see that. And this is not judgment, it is a mirror. A mirror that shows you where you are, which energies you are developing, which ones you are neglecting, and where you may need to return to yourself. That is why every post becomes a small signal. And all of those signals together create your digital aura. The aura around your profile photo is not decoration. It is not just a visual effect. It is the result of your behavior. The more you post from a certain energy, the more dominant that color becomes. If you post a lot from the energy of action, your aura shows action. If you post a lot from the energy of love, your aura shows connection. If you post a lot from the energy of knowledge, your aura shows wisdom. If you express yourself, that becomes visible. If you feel, that becomes visible. If you build stability, that becomes visible. If you expand perception, that becomes visible. So your profile is no longer just a photograph. It is not just a bio. It is not just a follower count. Your profile becomes a map of identity, a psychological imprint, a visual representation of the energy a person most often shares with the world. And over time, you can track how you change. Maybe at one point you were mostly in action, and later you entered a phase of love. Maybe you were in knowledge, and then you started expressing yourself more. Maybe you were in emotion, and then you began building security. Maybe you were in vision, and then you finally moved into action. That is growth. That is change. That is identity that is not frozen, but alive. But the solution is not only about what you post. The solution is also about what you consume. That is why content can be filtered through 7 different feeds. You can enter the to have feed when you need stability. When you want content that brings you back to the body, routine, security, and real life. You can enter the to feel feed when you want emotion, atmosphere, pleasure, experience. You can enter the to act feed when you need movement, motivation, discipline, strength. You can enter the to love feed when you need warmth, connection, gratitude, humanity. You can enter the to express feed when you want voice, creativity, attitude, authenticity. You can enter the to perceive feed when you want insight, perspective, intuition, a different way of seeing things. You can enter the to know feed when you want knowledge, understanding, wisdom, meaning. This means the feed is no longer an endless space where the algorithm decides your state. The feed becomes a choice. You choose the energy that feels right for you right now. You choose the vibe you want to be in. You choose what kind of content you allow into yourself. Because content is not neutral. Content always does something to you. Sometimes it lifts you. Sometimes it lowers you. Sometimes it calms you. Sometimes it disturbs you. Sometimes it inspires you. Sometimes it drains you. Sometimes it brings you back to yourself. Sometimes it takes you even further away from yourself. So the question is, does the algorithm choose your state, or do you choose it yourself? This system gives that choice back to the user, not through restriction, not through control, not through moralizing, but through awareness, through one simple question before every post. Which energy does this come from? And through one simple question before every feed. Which energy do I want to be in right now? At that point, the social network stops being only a place for scrolling and becomes a space for self-observation, a place where you see not only what you like, but what you are becoming, not only what you post, but what energy you send, not only who you follow, but what effect that content has on your life. That is why this concept is not just a new hashtag system. Hashtags organize the internet by words. This system organizes content by energy, by intention, by feeling, by identity. And that is exactly why the solution is different, because it does not try to turn you into a user who is more valuable to the platform. It tries to help you see whether you are becoming a person who is more valuable to yourself, whether you are covering all aspects of life, whether you are only in action or whether you also have love, whether you only know or whether you also know how to express, whether you only feel or whether you also know how to act, whether you only dream or whether you also know how to build, whether you only have or whether you also know how to be. Because a fulfilled life does not come from one energy. Fulfillment begins when different parts of you start to connect, when security does not kill emotion, when emotion does not stop action, when action does not forget love, when love does not silence truth, when expression has meaning, when perception has clarity, when knowledge does not remain only in the mind, but becomes life. That is why this is a social network that does not only ask, what do you want to watch? But, which energy do you want to be in? What do you want to nurture? Which part of life do you want to develop? And who are you becoming through everything you create, share, and consume? Because real freedom on the internet is not only being able to post whatever you want. Real freedom is knowing what it is doing to you, seeing your own trace, understanding your own energy, and being able to consciously choose the direction you are going. That is the essence of this system. Not another feed, not another hashtag, not another algorithm of attention, but a mirror, a map, a compass, a way for digital life to serve real life again, and a way for the user not to become only what the platform wants them to become, but what they consciously choose to become.